So I've got a son who is autistic. He was diagnosed when he was 7 years old. Andrew really enjoyed playing football. However, he found some challenges with that. He had very challenging behaviour when he was at school, ended up going to a special school, and actually at one stage we thought he was maybe going to go into care because his behaviour was such that it maybe needed that. And then he found an organisation called Special Olympics. And Special Olympics he found through the school, where he went every Wednesday. It was a routine, and after a couple of years it really benefited him in terms of the structure, understanding what rules were, etc. And fortunately he benefited so much so that he eventually got picked for Team GB. He went off to China, he got a gold medal, etc, etc. So it was quite a journey for him, and that kind of prompted me at one stage in my life to sort of reconsider what I was doing career-wise. So therefore I decided, I think if I can do it for Andrew, I can do it for loads of other kids. So for quite a while, I looked at the structure of football, why that was really not suitable for kids with autism, used my own personal experience and professional experience in having worked in the voluntary sector, and therefore put together a structure that I thought would work. Did a little trial of 10 kids, and 7 years later it's still working, and I've now got nearly 300 young people take part on a weekly basis. I suppose football was always within my background. You know, I've got 3 boys. The youngest, was turned out to be a professional footballer. Andrew wanted to follow the same path. The middle one turned out to play for Scotland in terms of international bowls. So there was always something around a ball of some kind. But football lended itself well in terms of the change that I wanted to make within the game. So I understood the structure, understood the formats. It just annoyed me that there was a lack of young people being able to take part. But I knew by developing a different structure and doing some sort of training and development with grassroots clubs, that they could actually participate, and why shouldn't they participate? So that's what I did. I started off Team United, and Team United, if you look at the 2 words, it's trying to get young people to play as a team and then uniting them together, and that's how it came. So football was always within my blood, and it was a bit more of a challenge for me in terms of a team sport, and therefore that's where I started. I suppose, the challenge is very much still the same, although a lot of things have moved forward in terms of people accepting and having more awareness around autism and neurodiversity. But there's still challenges for many young people. Mainstream football is played in every community, but you won't see a lot of children with autism playing within that because there's certain challenges for them. So I suppose the challenge is trying to get more clubs to recognise that, to embrace neurodiversity as it is, and include more young people in football. Some of the bigger challenges in terms of autism and neurodiversity is recognition of that in the wider football world, European, international. So when you look at Special Olympics, and Andrew actually had to leave Special Olympics because he didn't have a dual diagnosis of learning disability and autism, so therefore he couldn't progress in his football career into Paralympics or anything like that. So that was unfair, and it's still unfair. So one of the things that I championed to do was to actually lobby the Scottish Football Association in order for them to recognise that, because they had recognised sensory, physical, mental health, but neurodiversity wasn't within that. And it's taken me a long time, but now I have. Now Team United have become the game leader for autism football in Scotland. I started the first Autism League and Autism Scottish Cup. and we're going on to great things, but there's still the barrier there in terms of the wider recognition, and that all comes down from recognising classifications of the game that have to be adjusted. So there's a lot of work, time and money that has to go into that that's not readily available. I mean, there are several. However, there's a couple that I think that are really important to mention. And this is a family in the Glasgow area. And the dad is a single parent of a child with autism who he had written to me and said he hadn't actually realised how isolated he had become himself. So his child, he had been piling in so much attention and so much of his time into getting his son involved in sport or whatever it was in order that would take him out of the house. He hadn't actually realised how isolated he had become himself until he came to the Team United session. And at the Team United session, not only was his son accepted and has flourished as a result in terms of being able to play football and to be accepted, he's also gone on to playing for the school team, doing better at school, etc. But from the dad's perspective, he's now met friends, he's now rekindled his love of camping and fishing. He's met people, like-minded, and he's now got a social life. And as he said, he's no longer isolated. He didn't actually realise how the impact of having a child with autism had actually impacted on his life as well. In growing anything within the community is actually to work with the community itself. And in this case, with football, when I started Team United, I just thought everybody would open their doors and it would be, they would see the vision and the passion the same that I have. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Going back 20 years when my son was going through Special Olympics, I thought everything would have changed and everything would have been a better place, but actually I found that there wasn't much of a difference. So operationally, I found things difficult again, still having the same conversations in order to try and break down these barriers. But what I did was I found a few people within local authorities who believed in my vision, were quite happy to work alongside me, introduced me to a couple of grassroots football clubs that they thought would be suitable in doing. And I think I started off with £2,000 in West Lothian, had 10 kids, and it just grew and flourished from there, ending up now with 27 clubs. So some of the challenges that we have are mostly around anxiety with young people, unexpected things happening. When I was given training the other night, I was actually saying to the group, we don't often have sessions on when it's fireworks night, for example, because it's not that they don't like fireworks. It's not that they don't want to play football. It's just that the unexpected noises, the unexpected demands on them within a football match are actually far too much. They need time to process that information. And unfortunately in football, it's a very quick response and you can't do that. So sometimes you've got to slow down the game. You've got to look at the environment and you've actually got to teach or learn them the skills to do that in a different way. One of the ways that we do that is really useful is walking football. Walking football is is probably one of the only games that you can actually play football with your head up and walking with the ball. It's a very much of an even playing field around young people who may have more difficulties than others. And often I bring in silent walking football because then for people that are non-verbal or have more difficulty in communicating, it creates that level playing field that suits everybody. The other thing that I do to try and teach positions and structures that they're maybe not familiar with is through animal football. So getting some plastic animals from Amazon, a green mat that resembles a pitch, and asking them to pick their 11 animals and who they would put in goals. So for example, they might put a giraffe in goals. So I might say to them, do you think a giraffe would make the best goalie? And they would say yes, because they're tall. So then we would go on to say, but actually they would be a lot slower in saving the ball. So what animal would relate to that? What skills do you need to be a goalkeeper? So it's using the power of football in different ways and having different conversations for them to understand. Young people with neurodiversity are visual learners, and it's really important that you look at different ways of how you can achieve that. Football is one of the most socially challenging team sports that you can get. And if you think about autism and some of the deficits that young people have around social communication, social interaction in particular, but social imagination, it's really not an easy thing to do. Talking to your teammates, socially interacting, banter with your mates, all of these kind of things, but understanding the rules of the game, particularly if you've not had an opportunity to play, is really, really difficult to overcome. So in that way, looking at the game and looking at the structure of the game, I haven't done anything to alter the rules of football, but all I've done is welcomed young people in and better understood what their needs are, what their aspirations are, and actually developed a program that actually better meets that. I suppose it's all about celebrating achievement. I think when I was, looking back, it was always really important to me to try and break down that barrier of the way that football in particular is looked upon, which is competition and winning. And if you framework something around achievement and celebrating that achievement, therefore you've got something to build on. So using that platform, that's where I see it going. I very much started our journey on working with upper primary into secondary. And for Team United, there needs to be a transition for some of these young people from the age when they get to 15, 16. What we found was that a couple of seasons ago, we had about 40, 50 young people of that age leaving. And there was nowhere for them to go, but they still turned up every Tuesday or Thursday wanting to help. So I needed to develop something new and something for them that kept their passion, that kept them coming to their happy place, as they would describe. So therefore, for me, it's about developing a 16+ service, which I've already scoped out, which is going to be mostly around social participation, to break down some of the barriers that they would face in terms of gaining life skills, and that's going to be a social community league. So I'm hoping that through funding and through investment, I'll be able to take that forward.